Welcome to Table Talk 9.75. Today, we're actually talking about tabletop gaming. Crazy, right? Leave a comment or email us if you have any suggestions.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to Table Talk. I did something fun and interesting yesterday. We often run these big in-person games at Cabooses house. Sometimes it's historical miniatures wargaming. Sometimes it's TTRPG stuff. And so we've been playing a lot of Dungeon Crawl classics over the course of the last year. And we have been talking for a while about running some kind of spooky Halloween game. And so Jesse and I spent a long time preparing maps for a haunted castle scenario. And Caboose installed not just LED strip lighting in the ceiling above the table, but black light as well. And it wound up being a very cool, visually interesting game because the LED strip lighting, I had a remote for, so I could change the color of the lights, but the black light made a lot of the dice really pop. And we 3D printed a bunch of miniatures that we were using, and Caboose also painted those. And I put some pictures in the chat, but he used UV reactive paint on certain parts of the miniatures. Like we had these suits of armor that instead of having heads, were just the tops of them were covered in candles, and he painted the flames on the candles so that they would react to the UV light, things like that. We also had a small fog machine, which is pretty cool. So, anyway, I mean, kind of gimmicky, but it was very fun and interesting.
Well, one way I think you could go from kind of gimmicky to having functional purpose in addition to the cool visuals is using a black light. You know, you can basically have an invisible ink on your maps. So much like playing Vampire Hunter, or whatever that board game is called.
The greatest game of all time.
You could have the maps change based on the light that you're using.
And that was originally the way that we were going with it, was we wanted it to be sort of almost a puzzle room kind of game where maybe they would get some item that would allow them to see some kind of magical writing that they couldn't otherwise see, or things along those lines, that maybe they would be able to reach out and grab items that reach through some kind of veil and grab an item that was in another dimension or something.
Yeah, I mean, you could do a straight up Link to the Past kind of thing where, activate some magic effect or use a magic item and it transports you to a slightly different version of the world.
Yeah, there's a lot you can do with this. And what we found yesterday, though, was even adults are just fascinated by things glowing under the black light. And it's very, very nice to have the most visually interesting thing in the room be the game and not a cell phone.
Yeah, I can see that.
So, we blacked out the basement that we play in. And so, we really had a lot of control over what things looked like down there from a lighting standpoint. And there was some kind of subtle stuff that was really helpful. Like the map we were using was drawn on white paper. And so even if we had regular lights on, with the black light on as well, the map just really pops. It's it's much more eye-catching.
Right.
And so there were subtle things like that where it just elements of the game, like the map and the dice and the minis, are way more prominent and vivid. But then once you start turning other lights down, you get these very cool glowing effects. You're able to use some of the colored pencils I had, or we got out some crayons at one point. You can draw in glowing ink, basically. I mean, it was just a a cool thing that I think we're going to incorporate into a lot more games now, both as like an eye catcher and as a functional element like you described.
It doesn't surprise me that your players are bringing crayons to the table as a snack.
Well, I mean, we don't eat them anymore.
Right, yeah, now that you've discovered there's actually a different purpose
there's a use for them, yeah.
Yeah, beyond being delicious. No, that's cool.
Yeah, the other thing I found that was really helpful was using those to mark, like when we dropped a rope, or when we would kill, one of our pumpkin monsters, and basically, have it be like, this is where he was, or this is where like a body was. That way it didn't clog up the map as you're trying to move things around, but you knew where it was, and it was really bright, which was awesome. Made it really easy to see.
Yeah, you can see in some of the pictures we posted, like markers that people put down on the map. Some of that is like highlighter, glowing in the UV.
Right, and that's why I think it would be super cool to do the alternate world thing. Is because, something could be like barely visible or basically invisible during normal light, and then you turn on the black light, and now you're in mirror world or whatever.
Yeah, I think based on the little bit of experimenting we did yesterday, if you were to draw a map, and what I use is I just have an easel pad that has 1-inch grid squares on it. I think I bought a 3-pack on Amazon for $40 or something. If you sketch out a map in pencil and then color it in with colored pencil, and then take like a highlighter, like a fluorescent, or not, what am I thinking? Like a neon colored highlighter, and lightly draw what you want in a similar color to what you've already done in colored pencil. I think it will be, depending on how you do it, it won't really be very easy to see in daylight. But then as soon as you hit it with the black light, the highlighter will pop right out.
Right.
And I'm sure there are more subtle ways that would be harder to detect, but even something that simple with items you probably already have are enough. And LEDs are just a miracle technology, and buying a strip of, buying, I think we had 100 feet of multicolored, or, controllable color LEDs, and then maybe 2 10-foot strips of black light, and total, the cost of that setup was probably like $60 or $70.
Right, yeah.
So, yeah, anyway, I went in thinking, this could be interesting, but we'll see. It might be more trouble than it's worth. No, like, everybody loved it, and they loved it all day. Like, we played a long game, and it did not stop being fascinating.
No, that's interesting. It's I'd never thought to incorporate something like that, which is totally unfeasible for me right now. But I think you could definitely get into some interesting mechanical things with that, which is what I'm always into.
Talking about like alternate worlds in board games, it reminds me of a long time ago on Table Talk. We talked about the board games that I like to play, and we talked about a game called Mansions of Madness, which is like an interesting. Yep. The game is a board game, but it's also supported by an app. So it DMs for you, and so it lets you play more complex scenarios without you having to actually manage the ins and outs of DMing. But there was one scenario that I played a while ago where one half of the like party is in the past. So there's like things that the group in the present needs that they don't have, and then the group in the past is like running around the same area trying to find them, and then putting them in this little cubby under the floorboards so that the group in the future can then collect it from that same cubby while they're like busy fighting for their lives. It was a very interesting scenario, having two people or two groups playing in the same area but in different timelines and having to coordinate that.
How did the people in the past know to put those items there?
The the concept of the two-world thing was at the beginning of the scenario, a portal appeared, and half the people got sucked in, half the people didn't. But then the portal shrunk down so that nobody could pass through anymore, but you could still talk through it.
Okay, so information can go, but not matter anymore, basically.
Yep. So, so the people in the future could be like, oh, we need XYZ. And then the people in the past would go, oh, we found that thing. And then they could put it in the little cubby. But I had never seen anything like that before. And it was fascinating. Once we figured out what was going on, it was super fun.
It's kind of like my favorite movie, The Lake House.
I was going to say that raises some interesting questions about how the time travel in that particular universe works.
It does, yeah. But, that's not something that we were super concerned about.
Sure. It's just an interesting
Did the people who were playing
experiment.
in the present watch the people who were playing in the past and you like took turns, or were they playing simultaneously?
Yeah, that was one of the kind of unfortunate things about the scenario is it took a lot of table space because you basically had two maps going on at the same time. So we had to. There was a moment where we were a little concerned that we weren't going to be able to continue because we were like, oh, we're gonna have to take the current map, shift it to the side, and start building a separate map over here for the people in the past. But we were able to make it work, and then everybody could see what everybody else was up to. What a great game. Mansions of Madness. Like,
That sounds super fun.
Have you ever played it?
No. I want to now.
Okay.
Yeah, I
It's,
have it. I still have yet to ever play it.
Mansions of Madness is, I would say, my favorite, packaged tabletop game. Again, we've talked about it previously on the Table Talk, but the idea of it is there is an app. You can also get it on Steam, so you can put it up on the TV if you want, that does the DMing for you. And so you play, there's mystery scenarios, there's some that are just straight up horror stuff. But what the app will do is it'll say okay, you talk to this person or you walk through this door, put this tile down. And then you'll take the tile out of the box and you'll put it on the table. And you'll build out this map. But since it is controlled by this app, there's a lot of complexity to it that you don't really have to deal with from a rules perspective, because the game will just tell you oh, now this happens, or now you have to do this. And I've played the same scenario 5 different times and gotten 5 different endings because they just make it branch a lot, based on what choices you make, what you succeed at, what you fail at. And there's just a lot of replay value, and it's just a fascinating game to play. I love it. I'd love to play it again. If you ever get up here, or if I go down there again, I'll probably bring my copy. I think you would enjoy it a lot.
Hell yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, if Jack, if we ever live in the same time zone again, then I've got a couple games that I want to bust out with you. They look incredibly complex and frustrating, and I don't think anyone else would be willing to try them out. But speaking of in-person gaming, I actually ran a game yesterday for my local crew, and details not super important. But Duncan, I got to do your favorite move for running a game, which was after the party kind of burned it down. They hit me with the, "Oh hey, but what would have happened?" And I got to.
And you said.
And I said, "Sorry, you burned it down. You don't get to know." So I think we've talked about this on Table Talk before, but as a recap, especially in Delta Green, it's often a tendency of players or agents to just blow up or burn down whatever the offending item, person, or location is, because it's just it's an easy, sort of foolproof way to get rid of the problem, or it might seem that way.
And sometimes it makes sense.
And sometimes it's perfectly reasonable. However, it also deprives you of whatever the adventure was supposed to be.
Yes.
And so, I had done this one time, or I had done something similar where I essentially avoided the plot in order for like a higher security method. And then when I was done, I was like, so Duncan, like, what would have happened if I hadn't done that? And he was just like, Duncan basically said, no, like, you either, like, if you don't want to play through it, then you don't get to know what the story is. You don't get to have like your easy win and then also get the fun of knowing what was supposed to happen. Like, if you want that to happen, then you need to make it happen. And I think that's a perfectly reasonable approach to that kind of thing. I've just never personally implemented it. I didn't really have much cause to until yesterday.
Yeah.
I remember the first Delta Green scenario. It was me and you, Shepard, that was being run by Duncan. Where we basically just like gave up and walked away from the mystery. And at the end, we were like, oh, so what was XYZ? And that was when I was first introduced to that rule.
Well, and I think we hit enough dead ends that we didn't know what to do. I don't think it was so much a deliberate choice of like, well, screw this, and then walking away.
That's not quite how I remember it, but yeah, maybe.
Well, and I do want to, put a couple of things on the table here. First, over time, I've tried to get better at making, because the burn it down stuff is often unsatisfying from like a story standpoint. To give an example to listeners who don't know what we're talking about, imagine you're trying to set up some mystery scenario where, I don't know, there's like some crime syndicate in this building that your players have like, they've tracked them to a particular location, and these people have connections to a lot of the other things the players were investigating. And so what you're thinking as a game runner is like, oh, well, they should like spy on them for a while. They should like maybe stake the place out, or try to break in, or try to like smooth talk their way in, or there are a bunch of different things they could do to interact with this cool location that has like interesting characters and information in it. And then one player will say like, well, what if we just like make a fertilizer bomb and we blow the whole place up? And so,
genius.
Depending on the way that you've set up the objectives, though, that might make sense. And so I have tried to get better at providing narrative reasons why just like scorched earth isn't a good idea. Right. Like you stand to gain more by adopting a more narratively interesting set of tactics. But
we had kind of a similar situation last week with Tommy Two Eyes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, so I haven't published that, but that'll probably go out next weekend. But yeah, the situation where like a non-combat solution was, would have been preferable, and in fact pretty simple, but it just didn't occur to the players at the time.
Not for a moment did I consider not trying to kill them.
Oh, 100%. Cassian was gonna try to kill him.
Yeah, until you were beaten and bloody by the encounter.
I think something that complicates this is a lot of people are not familiar with the concept of metagaming, and many people who are don't care. So, listeners, metagaming is the idea that you as a player may know things that your character doesn't. And so, depending on what type of game you're playing, you need to adjust your decision making accordingly. And so I play TTRPGs with a lot of people who also play war games, and in a lot of military war games, it's totally acceptable to metagame. Like, it's fine for you looking at a board that has a bunch of different units distributed across a map to, you only know like where the bad guy is because you're looking at this big map and his pieces are moving around. And so you like omnisciently, your like infantry unit that's miles away on the board, you move him to intercept something he couldn't possibly know if this were a real scenario.
Right, and the commander, in this case you, has like the ability to communicate perfect information to everybody on the map.
Right.
And
so,
they probably also don't care about their individual lives and are willing to sacrifice in a way that is possibly unrealistic.
yes, and so like from a storytelling standpoint, at the level of an individual unit, this doesn't make any sense. But from a like just a I'm God moving pieces around a board standpoint, sure. And so a lot of war games have different mechanisms that deal with this kind of thing, but by and large, metagaming happens and is not frowned upon. Whereas in TTRPGs, it almost always is frowned upon. If you as a player are looking to, like, I think the example I'd heard before is like you're checking a chest for traps, and so you the player say like, all right, I want to check for traps, and your DM tells you, all right, go ahead and roll, something, make some kind of check, and you get a really bad roll, and the DM tells you, okay, well, you don't find, like, you checked and you didn't find any traps. You, the player, know that if there are traps there, you would not have detected them because you rolled poorly. But your character checked for traps and didn't find any, and so they should probably open that chest.
Right, yeah, I always phrase it as like, yeah, you're pretty confident there's no traps, which,
Sure.
Doesn't help to fully bridge that, but it's like, it's a pointer in the right direction. But yeah, if they're not super familiar with like metagaming and where those lines are, then they'll be like, hey, anybody else want to take a look?
Yeah, but so there's a metagaming element to the whole, revealing story information that you don't actually learn by playing the game. But I think there's sort of a frustrating element is the idea that, actually interacting with this like cool location with NPCs and stuff like that I've put together isn't interesting enough for you to want to do it. If that makes sense, like you can't win these games. They're not winnable. That's not the point. And so the burn it down stuff, I think, ultimately stems from like a misunderstanding of what is going to be more fun.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I've talked about it a little bit before on the podcast of that's like a sort of an interesting element of game design in general, no matter kind of what you're talking about, where a lot of times what your average game player for whatever game it is will gravitate towards is a lot of times something that will be something that will secure a win but will make it less fun. The example I gave before was an XCOM, which is like a turn-based strategy game. Players will, if they're not given like a turn limit to reach a certain objective or whatever, then they'll like advance super duper slowly and cautiously in a way that makes sure that they won't lose any guys, but it ends up making things take way longer, and it means that like the stressful part of the game, like the thing that makes it exciting, is diminished in a way that, players will strategize all the fun out of the way they play.
Yeah.
And now again, and that can be fun for people. Not everyone's the same, but when they did some like focus testing on these things, people ended up having more fun with it being a little harder and them having to like actually make like trade-offs as opposed to just crawling through the level. And I think that as we're talking about it, it's very similar for like Delta Green. Yeah, where I don't want to lose my character, even though, it's Delta Green. Like, you shouldn't go in to Delta Green maybe too attached to the character.
Tim Bars will never die.
Yeah. You have to be willing to do something, that's maybe a little more dangerous. And that's something that, again, even in like the player's handbook, it talks about when you're creating an adventurer for Dungeons and Dragons. Like, there's a small amount of metagaming that's healthy, of like understanding that, hey, my character needs to be somebody who wants to go on an adventure. And so when something is put in front of him, he can't be like, oh, that's too dangerous, I'm just gonna stay home. Like, there's an appropriate amount of metagaming, I think, that says like, no, I need to make a character and have them act in a certain way that like lets them get out the door and start this adventure. Because if I'm too like risk averse, then I'm not an adventurer, and I don't belong. My character does not belong in this party, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
Campaign idea: a party of entirely actuarials who, before every combat, sit down and calculate the odds of success and decide whether or not to engage.
Genius.
Yeah, but they have really good like job security and relatively high compensation.
Yeah, and outside of tax season, they're pretty open for these adventures.
Yeah.
Well, actuaries don't do taxes.
Oh, never mind.
You're thinking about CPAs.
Yeah, you're right.
Well, they'll go recruit a CPA, but
There you
in
go,
limited
yeah.
times.
Well,
yeah.
you know what
the baby of the party.
they say an actuary is just like an accountant, but with less personality.
Oh, nice.
No, I do think. I know it's early in the morning here, but I'm going to go 3 beers deep and tell you that I think there's a deeper philosophical thing going on here, which is that there's some tension between like what the players want and what will actually make them happy. And it's similar to like players want to level up and get incredibly powerful magical items. And yet, if they get those things, it will not make the game more fun.
Right, because it
That's not-
trivializes a lot of stuff.
Right, yeah, it may make the game worse, and so those things need to be doled out very carefully. A lot of people believe that after like level 10 or level 15, people move this line around, that like once you level beyond a certain point, D&D just sucks. Like high level play is the worst.
Yeah. I'll agree with that.
I'm sympathetic to that view. I think, with the right people and the right tone, it's still a lot of fun. Case in point, some of the downtimes we've done, but that's almost farcical.
Right, exactly. It's like you're playing a different game at that point.
But like with in games I care about, like my Monday night campaign right now that I do with some of my coworkers, I'm doing XP based leveling, which I really like because players who attend more sessions make more progress, which is cool. But we're playing DCC, so leveling up isn't like this earth-shattering thing where, like, at no point is anyone developing superpowers. Yes, they get more health, and, over time they'll have the ability to, like, do more than one thing per turn and stuff like that, but it's not nearly as game-breaking as it is in D&D, but it's taking a long time, and the XP I give out session after session, it depends on what they do, but it's relatively flat, whereas the amount of XP it takes to advance each level, steps up pretty significantly. So like those bumps are very meaningful, but they're not that big, and I think we're striking a good balance there, but most of our listeners probably don't know this, but we actually did a previous campaign.
What?
And I want to say what I did there was we leveled like almost once a session.
Yeah, it was
Close to it.
fascinating.
I thought it would be because I wanted to, like, at the time I was running the kind of campaign I thought I would want to play in, and now I don't think this is the campaign I would want to play, but by the time we were done with the campaign, everyone was level 20.
And not only were we level 20, we also had crazy items.
Yes. I read through the DM's guide and the player's handbook, and I thought, like, these magic items aren't good enough. They're not powerful enough. And so, yeah, the magic items were game-breakingly powerful. I think everyone could fly by the end. People had the ability to just like nullify magic and do all kinds of insane stuff. So that didn't make the game better.
I don't know if I agree with that. I had a ton of fun with that.
I'm not saying we didn't have fun with it. I'm saying I suspect we would have had even more fun if we actually had to solve problems. I in my Monday night game, which is very much the it's the reaction to the first campaign. I'm running the same campaign for a different group of people, and I'm running it very differently. And the best, most interesting, memorable sessions have all been the group solving these weird problems because they don't have that many tools. That's what people remember and talk about, and I don't know. I mean, it really is, a lot of times it's as simple as just putting some kind of interesting logistical issue and not hand waving it, saying how are you guys going to do this? But really meaning it, how? I'm not saying just make some check and roll a die. What are you going to do? How are you going to move this thing from point A to point B? And they will have a blast taking half an hour to try to figure it out, given the different tools and abilities the group has. And, insane magic items not required to have a good time.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we spent way more than a half an hour figuring out how to cart back 800 pounds of golden spider. And it was worth it. It was worth it.
And it's not an either or thing. I'm not saying there's no place for this stuff. We will get there, but I don't know. I have very different ideas now and expectations about what is going to be more fun.
Yeah, one of the things that I've been toying with, and so I did this last night when I was running this game, is when players, or when the characters, however you want to phrase it, whenever they make they deliberately make a decision that they deliberately make an unwise decision, and I asked them are you sure? And then they continue to do it. I make them actually live with the consequences. So at the end of this session, basically, these guys were supposed to save this forest spirit. That was kind of the where this was going, and one of them decided to throw a fireball at it when it was trapped and hurt. I'm not 100% sure, honestly, what he expected to happen. And I did ask, okay, you want to throw a fireball at him? Yes. You're sure? Uh-huh. Okay. I gave this guy plenty of chances to back out, but then after that, the party is all right, so how can we salvage this? I'm I don't know. You failed. You failed the quest. You deliberately made a choice that made it so that you the thing you came here to do, you have undone. I like that idea of, if they just have some bad luck, or, they have a good idea and they roll poorly or whatever, maybe we can find a way to overcome this. But if you deliberately decide to mess everything up, or do something that is counter to your own goals, I don't know. I'm much more interested in exploring how you deal with the consequences than I am of trying to help you figure out how to undo it.
Yeah,
I think that's really interesting.
To me, that's what made Curse of Strahd interesting.
Yes, and that's the example I was going to bring up is Vallaki. Is our party just made some pretty bonkers decisions when we were in there. We antagonized a bunch of people. We stole, we basically, the choices we made, while humorous, had the effect of turning most people in the town, that were important at all against us. And so if we expected to then walk back later and everyone's oh yeah, I love these guys, or there's some quick path to redemption, then that justifies all of the suboptimal decisions we made, not just the bad results we got from rolls. And that I think is an unhealthy relationship between players and their actions. Right? I like having to deal with the consequences when things go poorly.
But before we did that, Yeah, I mean, I think you guys got to Vallaki in session 4.
Yep, one
And
of the
then-
best sessions ever.
By session 7 or 8, you had shot yourself in the foot in enough different ways that it all kind of came to a head.
Beautifully, I might add.
And kind of all at once. And I remember when I was prepping for that session, I thought that's what I wanted to do. Like, I thought, I guess, imposing some kind of cost made sense and could be really interesting. But I thought, it could just be like a real annoying downer. Like, yes, this does narratively make sense, but if I do this, if people start turning on the party because they feel slighted in some way, and some of these friendly NPCs become unfriendly and stuff like that, is that actually going to be fun, or is it going to be initially interesting but then like just make the game frustrating? And it wound up being the most interesting thing we did in that campaign.
Yeah, it was up there for sure.
And even later on, many sessions later, when you were talking to the burgomaster of Kreshk,
Yeah.
and the party's talking to him and trying to figure out like where they could go, where they could visit, who they could talk to rehome his townsfolk. You start running through a list of different areas, and you're like, well, like probably not a good idea to go there because they don't like us. And then, well, I guess they really don't like us over here. And once it comes out that way, it's like, oh yeah, we're like every place we go, we're like unwelcome.
Yeah. Well, to your point, if you don't mind, about like why one of the reasons why I think Vallaki worked, as things turned out that way, was it wasn't just like this all of a sudden smack, we're screwed now.
No, we made a lot of decisions that led up to people saying leave.
Well, correct, but what my point is, with those decisions that we made and like those interactions had immediate consequences. Where, like, for example, when we went into the toy shop and Jack's character Eisen started like breaking his toys and threatening and intimidating him, like he wasn't like, oh, you guys, and then later on didn't like us. Like, it was clear in that moment that we had alienated him. And then similarly, the first time that the proprietors of the inn, I forget what their names are, but the Martikos, when they found out, or highly suspected that we had stolen from them, they kicked us out. So it was these things were like kind of building, but then it wasn't all just dropped onto one time, and so we already had this, this things are falling apart, and then they completely collapse, not just a sudden combustion. And so I think that helps set that tone and build the expectation.
You got the feedback you needed along the way to understand, like, hey, I'm like pushing here. These people have limits. Yeah. I think we managed that relatively well. But I'm trying to remember where I read this, but somebody online, maybe it was a forum where people were talking about murder hobo campaigns. So this is a very divisive topic. It's well known that many players want to be murder hobos,
or they default to that kind of behavior for
or they
some
default
reason.
to it, or when they get bored they switch to it. And it takes one murder hobo per party to make it a murder hobo party.
Right, yeah.
Only one person has to be committing murders for that to be a problem for your group.
Yeah.
And the DMs were talking about this, like, how do I handle this? Like, what, my players want to do this, and basically I've crafted this beautiful campaign that, is completely
colorful NPCs.
Yeah, totally ill-suited to the group I've just described. And, they want to just set buildings on fire and kidnap people and, kill shopkeepers and steal their wares and stuff like that. And the answer that someone provided was like, if they, if your players are murder hobos, run a murder hobo campaign. Like, they can, it's an RPG. If that's the role they want to play, like, maybe you should allow that, but then, like, respond accordingly. Like, if they kill a shopkeeper and steal, then the local, whatever the local law enforcement is probably coming after them. If they break into somebody's home, then that person may attack them. And similarly, like, law enforcement's going to come for them, and they're going to be banished from whatever this place is if they're not imprisoned. And like that can be a very fun game.
Right.
But like, impose consequences and make sure the consequences make sense within the logic of that world, so it's not, this stuff doesn't just fall out of the sky. But I think that is what a lot of these games are lacking, that I like that we introduced in Curse of Strahd is, what no D&D module is going to do a good job telling you is, if you steal from people, or you hurt them, or you insult them, or whatever, like, how are they going to react to that? What doors is that going to close on the group? And what doors might it open? And it's maybe it's the Darths and Droids thing or something, that like being like an NPC is like the worst job ever.
It's the worst job in the world. Yeah.
People like make fun of you, right? Like, while you're there, and act like you can't hear them. And
yeah, whether you're a janitor or the king, like,
right.
They'll treat you the same way.
But like, what if you don't run it that way? And so something I will do a lot of the times is, when like, players at all different types of tables like to have weird, bizarre, impossible strategy discussions. Like, yesterday's a good example. The players had very cleverly decided to split up in this haunted castle.
Genius.
And
Always a good plan.
so they're not close to each other. And as we began to understand metagaming, it became clear to some of them that, like, they didn't know where the other players were, or the player characters were. And so it would be someone's turn in combat, and they would say, like, all right, guys, so what are we doing here? Like, you guys are way up there, and I would have to say, like, what radio are you using to have this conversation?
It's Ansible communication.
Yeah, and the other thing is, your turn is 6 seconds long, so like, you can't. This isn't happening. This like strategy meeting. This guy is beating you in the face with a club, and you now have 6 seconds to respond to that. That's your turn.
Right.
Because you guys left the safe hallway and spread out. So now this is what we're doing. And
well, if it isn't the consequences of my decisions.
And if you want to regroup and have this strategy discussion, I think that's a great idea. But you gotta stop this dude from, like, beating your face in with a club first.
Yes, tip 1.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and I think one of the things that you were kind of getting at was, like, if you're the DM running these games, what are you incentivizing or disincentivizing? If a lot of times, players, are human beings, and so they respond to, things that are fun or not fun. This is something that I ran into when I was DMing that campaign for you and your buddies a long time ago, where, like, NPC interactions were really frustrating because, like, they were all very obstinate and difficult to work with. I didn't recognize that, so I didn't understand why you guys didn't want to interact with the NPCs in fruitful ways. Until you pointed it out to me at one point. And I was like, oh yeah, you're right. These guys are all jerks.
Which didn't save me from doing it any better when I started running. Like,
this is true. I'm not saying that's easy.
But
I didn't even recognize
common
it.
problem.
Yeah, and so if every NPC interaction sucks, or like every non-combat thing seems like it's too difficult to interpret, then a lot of players are just gonna default to, well, combat has rules that are, like, pretty well understood, so, like, that's a much more, like, fair way for me to approach anything, because at least I understand like what consequences my actions might have. Whereas whenever I do these non-combat encounters, it's a total crapshoot and I always lose.
Yeah.
And so like it can be totally understandable for players to want the security of the part of the system that has the most concrete and well understood rules. At least as they understand them for that table. So, and again, I'm not saying I'm excellent at this, because I'm not, but I think that is the answer to the, why are they murder hobos? Or that is a way to look at it is, are you incentivizing murder hobo behavior either by, failing to provide, reasonable consequences to that kind of action, or by making it so annoying to do anything else that they don't want to do anything other than be a murder hobo?
Yeah, and my addition to that is you can make the rest of the game similarly logically structured to combat. So,
yeah,
one of the things that I think makes the just like physics puzzle solving such a current feature of my Monday night game is the rules of the world are like clearly understood and predictable. Like my players understand that generally like moving things around in the world or like they have a pretty good idea of what I'm going to tell them to do in terms of making checks and what they can just do without making a check and what will require one. And so I can leave and go to the bathroom and they will continue to discuss how they want to tackle a particular problem because they have a good idea of what I'm going to make them do. It's not mysterious,
right?
And I think that gives them a lot more confidence and options with respect to just about any decision they might make because, yes, it's a fantasy world that has magic and monsters and stuff like that, but by and large, like things are logical. But Jesse, I think you were going to say something.
Well, I was just to say I think that making it so that it's not necessarily the rules piece, at least for like me, and in terms of this makes sense, but it's the thing that seems like we're gonna make progress. I've played in games where like that talking to the NPCs isn't going to make any kind of progress. I'm just gonna get mad and try to kill them because I'm tired of dealing with them. Versus there's whole Monday night, there's a whole series of different people that I could or should go talk to because I'm going to get different information from, and it's going to move me forward in a meaningful way. And so that piece of it is the part that I think really makes it richer and more interesting, and helps people not be murder hobos.
Right. Yeah. And that's something like I also recognize how hard it is to have a bunch of NPCs that are all like worth talking to. Like it's tough when you're a DM and you're trying to play a bunch of different characters. Mm-hmm. And so what I try to do as a player, not that I'm perfect about this, but it's something I try to focus on is like try to legitimately pretend that the NPCs are real people, and treat them that way and understand that they might have motivations that they're not willing to just tell me, and like basically cut the DM some slack and say like, okay, let's just take that and run with it and have my character like still try to like be polite and further their own agenda, but recognize that just because this character is frustrating or like I'm getting frustrated by this interaction doesn't mean that like my character therefore has any sort of license to like murder them or something. I think it's tough and it requires a little like grace on both sides, but it's something that I'm trying to do because being on the DM side now from time to time, I struggle so much to make like meaningful NPC interactions.
A strategy that I have developed that I think is helping is before just about every player interaction with an NPC, like the players would be coming in ice cold. They wouldn't know anything about that NPC before they talked to them. And so I think that makes the interactions more complicated. Now I try to be much more deliberate about either having NPCs talk about other NPCs, or otherwise, like, maybe describing what the NPC is doing as the characters approach them. Something that's going to give them an idea of who this person is. And so when they begin the interaction, they have some entering knowledge of like what kind of person they're dealing with. And so I'll give an example. Like, I have it's kind of a DMPC. I have a, like, sort of a companion type NPC to my party that, like, there's a rich benefactor that hired them to do a job, and then she has an assistant, and the assistant is pretty much always with the players. And,
oh yeah, I remember this guy.
Yeah, and he's the way I have him set up, he's like not he's generally pretty knowledgeable. Like, he knows his way around, he knows different people in town, and he's able to answer basic questions about like, he's able to help to some degree to solve questions about, like, what's the priority right now. And he has, like, a lot of trivia. Like, he knows a lot about a lot of things, and so he's just a good knowledge resource. He's not, like, a devastating fighter or anything. He's, he's got a bow, and if they get into a fight, like, he'll participate. He's not really moving the needle on anything. But one of the, I think, best things that he's there for is if the players are separated from the benefactor and they have, like, if they ever get to the point of, like, what are we doing here? What's this all about? He's available to recenter them.
Yeah.
And back to what I was initially describing, if the players ever get to a point where they're like, we're looking for, information on X and we're not sure where to go, he can scratch his chin and go, well, I guess we could talk to so-and-so. He's the harbor master, and I know he deals with this and that, or I've heard him talk about this. And then if the players say, oh yeah, we want to talk to that guy, then he will take them there, and on the way he will describe this guy. Say, okay, so here's the deal, harbor master, like, this is his name. Definitely don't ask him about this because this is a sensitive subject, and so by the time they talk to him, it's not like it doesn't trivialize the interaction with this guy, but they have time to plan. They have some expectation of, like, who they're going to meet. They still have to do the heavy lifting, but
right, it's not some unknown quantity that they're running into.
It makes it a more fully fleshed out character. It gives me time to, on the fly. We don't just teleport into an interaction with this character that I just made up. I've had a few minutes to sketch out someone that's a little more fully fleshed out. So anyway, that's my recommendation there.
No, that's a great recommendation. I never thought to frame things that way. Because the problem that I don't know if it's it's a me thing or what, but the problem I tend to have is, I'll do some amount of work, like, describing, like, hey, this guy's, like, really important and very powerful, and people be like, oh yeah, okay, and then they'll still go in and be, like, rude, intimidating, threatening, violent toward this person, and then they're like, well, like, what's with that guy? Why didn't he want to work with us? It's like, well, it's because you're a monster. Like, why would anyone want to work with you? It can be challenging, but I think I can do more work to establish who those characters are, or kind of warn them ahead of time that, hey, it might not be a good idea to put a knife to this guy's throat as soon as you meet him.
Yeah. I think another thing worth considering there is, if you're in the throne room talking to the king and your player's, like, mouthing off to him, you could, one of his, like, well-armed guards can just walk up and, like, lay the guy out, and
right.
roll damage, and I think you can narrate it in such a way that you can make it crystal clear that, okay, you guys can roll initiative if you want to and get into a fight with these guys, and there's zero question that you will get killed.
Right.
You can describe them in such a way that that's very clear. you can still basically give them the quest, but you can you could say, like, maybe it shifts from the king, asking them to do this now to saying, like, all right, we're like, I'm not paying you to do this anymore. You're gonna do this, or I'm gonna put you in the dungeon.
Right.
And if you refuse, like, either you can continue down the same story path, but you can twist it if they want to do that. There's like levels to this. You don't have to immediately just like, all right, everybody roll initiative, and like the knights are gonna pull their swords out and just kill all of you.
Yeah. No, that's a great way of phrasing it. I was actually just thinking the other night about some campaign ideas I have, and that sort of that exact situation, the throne room tension, was something I was thinking about, and that's a good way of phrasing the same thing.
One thing that I found that was really, really important when you were establishing that character in the Monday Night game, Duncan, was so the companion, at first, we didn't trust him, because we didn't trust anybody. And so having that trust built up so that the second time that we were back in port, when we were actually interacting with people and we were getting that feedback, like in the earlier interactions, like you were being truthful and trying to be helpful, and we were like, oh, I don't know if we trust this guy. And so we didn't necessarily like actually listen. And then, as we continued to play, it was like, oh, this guy's actually on our side and is like, somebody who's trying to help us. Then it was like, okay, really take all that insight, really lean on this person to get that so that we can have those better interactions and everything. And so that piece of it was huge in making the companion effective in doing the things you were trying to do.
Yeah. And I think it's dangerous, because you don't. I think what this looks like, if you do it wrong, is if the DM plays this character and drives with it.
Right, yeah, and takes the agency out of the player's hands or something.
Yeah, so I've been very careful to say, hey, this guy is smart, he's knowledgeable about the area and the people, but he's not assertive. He's kind of mild-mannered, he kind of wants to be left alone, but he has a job to do, and so he helps. He doesn't push, he doesn't solve problems independently. So he's available to the players, but he rarely just unless it's something very obvious, he rarely volunteers information that's just coming out of nowhere. He's not coming up with novel solutions to problems. Because that's what players do.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, that's really interesting. I like that idea.
But yeah, I'm one of the things I've been focusing on trying to improving is just narration that goes beyond dialogue, so that people are clearly picturing the scene roughly the way I want them to picture it, and so I'm trying to get better with nonverbal stuff. So back to the throne room example, if you clearly narrate the king's expression going from calm and relaxed to his face is turning a little red or something like that, and then he gestures to the attendant that is standing next to his throne, who then signals the captain of the guard that's in the back of the room, and you can see the guards that are flanking the room, they begin to, instead of just standing at rest, they put their hands on the hilts of their swords, and there's all kinds of, you don't have to crank it all the way up to 11 from 2. They're
yeah, it's an escalation of force, we call that.
Yeah, and right, and so there are so many clues you can give along the way that the things that you are saying are having an impact, and it's not the one that you want.
Right. Yeah. Give them a chance to course correct with some more subtle right. things before it goes Titanic.
Well, and another thing to throw out there is a lot of DMs play their NPCs dumb.
Right.
when in many cases, if the groups are basic, like if your party is a small group of bandits, which is like really the way that most people play, then like chances are this king is like much smarter, better informed than they are.
Yeah.
So it like I think it is very interesting every once in a while to have a heated discussion as an NPC, because like most NPCs are just they're either nakedly evil and can't be reasoned with in like a cackling kind of way, or they're like kind of dumb or pushover or something
just
like
endlessly benevolent.
Right. Like they'll just go along with anything. They're these Zen masters who like don't mind that you're destroying
insults and
their home.
intimidation just bounce off them morally.
Yeah, but what about like a normal guy that if you start insulting them, they like call you out on it, or like these. I mean, back to your description of you want these to be like real people. Having someone who's like has an agenda and wants to be taken seriously, and it's interesting to see how players respond when an NPC argues with them.
Right, but that's what I was getting at earlier, though, is like I think that in the perfect table, there's some player responsibility there to go into the interaction, not assuming that, or looking at the NPC as a person and not an obstacle.
Yes, but what I'm saying is, I think the easiest way to get them there is to teach them that NPCs are people.
Right. No, you're exactly right. It's not quite a counter. It's just a caveat. Is I think there are a lot of players, and I think I used to be one of them, that like no matter how hard you make it, or not how hard you make it, but how real you make it, like they will still just try to bulldoze through it.
Sure. And I think this, like, some groups just aren't meant to be.
Sure. Oh yeah. I'm a big proponent of that.
Some people make great friends and coworkers, but aren't a great fit for that particular group.
Yes.
I think sometimes I'm trying to think of what's an RPG that has like great characters and dialogue and stuff.
Mass
The
Effect.
Witcher.
Okay, so yeah, there's Mass Effect, and then there's Grand Theft Auto.
Sure.
Like, these are both fun games, but you're looking to get something different out of them.
Sure.
You're not trying to have deep, meaningful conversations in Grand Theft Auto. Like, you're stealing cars and like running people over and stuff like that.
Yeah, no, I mean that's absolutely a good point, and it's something that I've brought up a couple times before too. My point with bringing that up, it's actually sort of similar to what you're saying. Is like, if there are any DMs out there listening and they're having the same struggle, it could be that it's not that your NPCs aren't real enough, and like that's the only problem. Like there are some people whose sensibilities diverge in that way between a player and a DM that. They're just trying to play a different game than you're trying to run, so it might be that like, hey, that's just not going to work out between the two of us. Doesn't mean either of us are wrong. It's just a little incompatible.
Yeah, but my I guess advice in a nutshell is, if your players are murder hobos, like the right answer in almost all circumstances is like lean in. Like if your players are murder hobos, then like call the cops. The cops are coming now, and that's you.
Yeah.
Like so. So I mean that can be great, and it may be that when you make it clear to them that that's how this is going to go. Like it really is totally fine if they want to do that, but they're now about to be outlaws, and being an outlaw is hard.
Right.
That
suddenly all the contracts are drying up. This is so weird.
Yeah, I mean, you may see their eyes light up. Like maybe this is the like, oh, holy shit! Like this is it. That
actually really excited me last night when I was playing, because after because the way it worked, there were what 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people in the party, and one of them was like, "I'm gonna shoot a fireball," and then 2 of the players were like silent. One was like, "Yeah, good idea," and then another one was like, "What? No, why would you do that?"
Hell yeah.
And so the again, I'd asked for confirmation, and then once they did it, the one who was saying like, "No, that's a bad idea," he left the party. He was like, I'm out. Like I do not. I want to like distance myself from this party, go back to the quest giver, and say like, "I'm so sorry. I didn't know that was gonna happen. What can I do to make up for this?" But the rest of the party stuck together, and they basically like fled the country. Now this is a one shot, but
so this raises another question that I think is interesting, and I don't have a great answer for it yet. Sometimes one person in the party says, "I want to do X," and it's some like important, earth-shattering thing that's fast. And other people will react like, "Hold on, wait, don't do that." And the other person will be like, "No, I want to do it." And yeah, so how you adjudicate that, I think, is something that you want to have thought out in advance. I'll give a lower stakes example. So like, well, in your case, the guy says, "I want to throw a fireball," and another guy's like, "What? No, don't do that." You want to know like, okay, are you like, what are you going to do to try to stop them? Are you
right?
First of all,
is this person declaring they're shooting a fireball?
Sure. I mean,
just
based on how this is going, like, I mean, do you even have something that you could reasonably react to in time? And if so, what are you going to do? But so yesterday, one of the rooms in the castle was we had a couple of puzzle rooms, and there was a particular room that had 3 paintings in it. The puzzle itself isn't that important here, but basically there are 3 paintings, and corresponding to each painting there was a button, and there were 3 doors, and so the players walk in or the player characters walk in, and one of the players says, "Oh, I think I know which order these need to be pressed in. I'm going to press this one, and then this one." And didn't discuss it with the other players whose characters were still like working through the room trying to figure out what to do here. And I asked her, because a few people said, "Hold on a second." I asked her, so you're standing in front of this button, about to press it, and then you're going to move on and press these other 2 buttons in the sequence you just described. When they see you reaching out to press the button and they're saying stop, are you stopping? She says, "No." Like, okay. Well, I mean, I don't think there's reasonably anything they could do to intervene then. And so she presses the button. Now, the way this room was set up, it wasn't like press it in a particular sequence, and if you get it wrong, they all reset. It was you get to press one button,
you make
and
one
then all
choice.
the buttons go away.
Yeah.
And like one of those doors opens, and the rest of them stay shut and locked. But yeah, things like that got me thinking. What are better ways to deal with players making choices that are quick and impactful that other players disagree with? Usually, my process is kind of what I just described. Like, I'll try to, I'll ask them, okay, well, I'll ask the player making the decision, how, to what degree are you telegraphing this? Are you saying, "I am going to throw a fireball at the forest spirit in 3 seconds"? Or
unless somebody stops me.
Right, is it like that? And then, depending on their answer to that question, I'll ask, I'll make some kind of assessment of, would the other character be able to do anything about it? And if so, is a check required?
Yeah, some saving throw or a reaction or something.
Right, yeah. And then, depending on what they say they're trying to do, if it's I'm going to throw myself in front, okay, maybe I go to the other character and say, are you going to try to rein this back in or something? If the intervener is saying like, "Oh, I'm going to pull out my sword and try to kill them," or something like, I generally do not allow player-on-player rolls.
Right. Well, to kind of address the point you were making, or to, add something to it, I think that, because it is a really interesting question, and I don't have like a really good answer. I think that one way to kind of delineate a couple different situations where that comes up is sometimes that's a character choice. Like, my character is going to do something that is in character that benefits my character, but that the other people might take some sort of, issue with. Like, the classic example is like the thief stealing something they shouldn't.
Sure.
But at that point, it's not that the player is doing something unthinkingly in a way that, because they haven't thought to consult everyone else at the table first. They're doing something because it's something where their player's interests diverge from the character's interests diverge from those of the other characters. So
Right.
in a case like that, I would generally be more okay with just, okay, it happens, unless there's some like, I think there's also a question of gravity. Like, depending on how important that decision is, I think would also weigh how much I'm trying to, help the table adjudicate whether this is something that should happen or whether other people should be able to do something about it. Whereas if it's just something where it seems like the player just kind of like popped off with something and, maybe unthinkingly, and, other players, it has nothing to do with their character. They're just like, oh yeah, I don't know, I just do this. And it seems like it's going to be consequential. I think the, one approach is just asking, are you sure? As the DM, and giving them some time to reflect on whether that's something that, again, is a character decision or just something that they popped off with and it didn't occur to them that it's retarded.
Yeah.
Something like that. So, again, I don't think that any of these are like genius, full answers to the question of how you deal with that. But I think those are some factors that you can consider in figuring out what to do in that moment. Because, again, to re-describe my situation last night, that's what I did with that guy, where it didn't seem like this is just like a character decision of like, oh yeah, he's just a pyromaniac or he hates forest spirits or whatever. To me, it seemed more like a player would just kind of like, oh yeah, I walk and I shoot a fireball, haha. And so that's why I asked, especially when one of my other players was like, no, don't do that. I'm like, are you sure? You're really going to throw a fireball at this thing? Like, that's what you actually want to do. And so when he said, yeah, I'm like, well, okay, all right. Like, if it's something that you have now thought about to at least some degree, and, you're saying that you're not saying you're throwing a fireball, you're just going in and doing it, then yeah, like, I don't know, I'm not going to give the other players a chance to stop it. Like, there you go. Now you have to live with the consequences.
Yeah.
And so the are you sure? Because that's like a trope in D&D or role-playing games in general, is like when the DM asks, are you sure? When you say you're going to do something, right? That's supposed to get that thought process going of like, okay, hang on. Like, they're asking me if I'm sure, which implies that maybe I shouldn't be. I think that was like a big thing on Critical Role, was whenever Matt Mercer said, are you sure? Like, everyone's like, okay, hang on. Like yeah, I might have popped off with something stupid and I should reconsider before I take action. But I mean, it's a really good question, because I think that kind of thing, especially the bigger your party, the more likely it is that people are going to have different ideas. Because you also don't want to turn it into every time someone makes a decision, there's like this huge committee about it, that has to come to a ruling at the tribunal before anyone can, pick up a mug of ale at the tavern.
Right.
Which obviously is a farcically, ridiculous example of that kind of thing, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, especially in these high, high impact, quick decisions, I want to adjudicate them very quickly, because I want to. It seems completely inappropriate to me to have a 15-minute conversation about an action that would take 2 seconds.
Yeah, I agree with that.
In the moment. So it's got to be. It's kind of like when it comes to a player's turn in combat, there are players that have been, they pay very close attention and they know their character sheet really well and they know the rules. And so when you get to them, they go, all right, I'm doing this, here's what I roll. Like, they're prepared. And then there are players where it comes to be their turn and they go, okay, well, can I do this? And, it's considerably less well thought out. And what I will often do to players that I think do this consistently, are like consistently unprepared for their turn, is I will, with the tone of my voice and the words that I use, convey to them that, this night is bearing down on you, and you have seconds to react to it. Are you going to do this, or this? And I'll put it to them in a way that's like, oh my God, this is urgent. Like, make a choice right now. And if they don't come up with something, I say, okay, you're dodging, and we move on. I think decisions like this, I generally handle the same way. Like, I try to convey urgency, time pressure. Like, you do not have time to sit down and optimize and, sketch out the ideal plan for this. Like, this is happening. You have to react. What do you do? And if you don't have an answer now, then it just happens.
Right. Yeah, I think I'm not saying this disagrees with you. I think there needs to be a little leeway for discussion of, like, some specifics because, so say there's a knight barreling down on you and you see them. Your brain can process an image it sees with its eyes a lot faster than you can describe it.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I mean, there's definitely a place here for clarifying questions and stuff like that. What I mean is, if
right, but you only get two. You get two clarifying questions.
But one, I mean, there's I think a big difference between clarifying and deliberating.
Right, or delaying. Yeah.
Right. So that's what can't happen here. Is if somebody's about to push a button on the other side of the room, you can't think for a couple minutes to craft the ideal thing to say to, like, distract them.
Right, you need to react now.
Right, yeah. Either you're trying to stop them or you're not. What are you doing? Okay, time's up. They're pushing the button.
Right, they push the button. Yeah. No, but I think that's really interesting, and I think that, especially if you're doing, like, a long campaign with the same group, or even if it's not one campaign, if you're playing a lot with the same group, over time, people can get to the point where instead of it just being a player pop-off, it's if they're doing something like that where the character interests diverge, they're doing it for character reasons and not for, like, bad table etiquette reasons.
Yeah.
This has been some meaty discussion. I've loved this.
We're talking about the craft.
Yeah. I mean, a little meta, but this is, like, my favorite kind of stuff to talk about on Table Talk. Is I think that there's a lot of interesting things that go on at tables, and I think there's a lot of, like, common experiences of things going wrong in similar ways, and I think it's interesting to kind of talk about, why do those things happen, what can be done about it, what's avoidable, what isn't, how do you mitigate. I think that stuff is really interesting, because it's all about crafting a better experience and learning from them, which are things I like doing.
My big takeaway from this is that we need to do another Corvid and Claire level 2 adventure again.
Level 2 adventure?
Yeah. Because the couple of sessions that we did where we just had, level 20 characters walking into a scenario that had, like, essentially no challenge.
Oh, I get what you're saying. Yeah.
Scenarios set for level 2.
Yeah.
Yes.
You're level 20.
And they were incredible because it enabled all of the bad behaviors that you guys have been discussing of, like, we're just gods. We can
I'm
do
going to drop
want.
a temple on this guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I thought was a really interesting difference between, we did those, we did one unrecorded session with Corvid and Claire, and then we did the one with Corvid, Claire, and Emmerich when they went to Farboff, sorry. And then, right, and because those were, stupid easy, like, Claire would just walk up and lightning would strike everyone and they die or whatever.
We didn't even roll.
Right, yeah, what's the point?
If you decided to kill a monster, they just fell out.
Right. But then you guys did Witch Hunt, which was more geared towards a level 20 set, or a set of level 20 adventurers. Which had all the features of Duncan, everything you described earlier that sucks about level 20 adventures.
I still need to get that hat.
I'm working on it. But the the combat just took forever. I mean, just the Lady Friday fight, which was 3 level 20s fighting another level 20. That was like an hour and a half long. It took forever. And sort of some of the sheen was coming off pretty quickly. By the way, that hour and a half was after I cut out a lot of admin. It was more like 2.5 hours when it started.
Well, what was even worse than that was the session we did with the randomized level 20 characters. So we had to figure out
that was
what we were. That was amazing. Bob the Improbable.
Yeah, Throck and I can't remember Nerf's character's name, but
The Sun Soul Monk Vampire.
that was mine. His was a level 19 Paladin, level 1 Blood Hunter.
Yeah, I remember the
who's
the
really
Hemocraft.
depressed.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Hemocraft dies. That was genius. But especially because he spent all of his time using his Blood Hunter abilities instead of his 19 levels of Paladin abilities. But anyway, yeah, that one was extra special. But yeah, it's interesting. I think there's a lot of fun table dynamics things that I don't know. It's part of the reason why I love these games so much, and I love playing, and I want to get better at running them. So yeah, good stuff.